Let's read together the parting poem of Billy Budd Sailor. I'm finishing the book. And I remember reading this when I was a teen and being moved by it. So I'm ready to be moved again. I started to read it. It's the last bit before the book is done. I started to read it and then I stopped. I said, let me read it and share it, okay? So Billy has been hung. Spoiler alert, right? I'm going to spoil the story. As if you probably get the point though. But he's been hung. It was a just hanging, I would say, by martial law, but maybe an injustice to all that is right and good. And the idea is that there's the remembrance of Billy has carried on through the fleet. Here, I'll read the last paragraph leading up to it as well. This is the last paragraph, and then a poem called Billy and the Darbies. And Darby is an archaic term for chains. So imagine, before Billy was hung, he spent overnight in a chamber of the ship with a marine guard standing by, waiting for a first light, 8 bells, dawn, 4 a.m. And before all the crew would be summoned up, and Billy was brought to the deck, and on the mainmast, yardarm was hanging over the ship, a rope was hanging down, hanging around Billy's neck, and what's the word? Without haste, without waiting, simply drawn up. 2 men would draw him up to the hanging, so they'll lift him off of the deck to hang. And Billy, without motion, simply went to his death, and then was promptly wrapped later in his hammock, and that was weighted down and buried at sea. And the idea is now that the story came back. Now, this is quite moved by the crew, who understood that Billy's crime had to be punished, although they knew there was a missing element of justice given the circumstance of who Billy was, what Billy was really. But when it finally reached, the information finally reached back to the naval bases in London, and was a message was put out in like a newsletter to the fleet commanders and lieutenants, etc. And the story was somewhat perceived differently, different optics, right? So the master-at-arms, who was really the villain in all this, a tragic villain if there ever was one, was portrayed as the one that was to whom justice was failed to serve, to whom a crime was committed, when it was really kind of the opposite. An accident for it came to him, and that it was Billy who was the traitor, not the way that anyone on board the Bella Ponte would have, Bella Potent would have perceived the story. And so then that was the way it was, and the issue was washed at the hands of the fleet, and on they go. But then Melville finishes the story with describing how the remembrance of Billy stayed with the crew that had been there. Let's read. Everything is for the term venerated in navies. Any tangible object associated with some striking incident of the service is converted into a monument. The spar from which the foretopman was suspended was for some years kept trace of by the bluejackets. Their knowledge followed it from ship to dockyard, and again from dockyard to ship, still pursuing it even when at last reduced to a mere dockyard boom. To them, a chip of it was as a piece of the cross. Ignorant though they were of the secret facts of the tragedy, and not thinking but that the penalty was somehow unavoidably inflicted from the naval point of view, for all that, they instinctively felt that Billy was a sort of man as incapable of mutiny as of willful murder. They recalled the fresh young image of the handsome sailor, that face never deformed by a sneer or subtler vile freak of the heart within. This impression of him was doubtless deepened by the fact that he was gone, and in a measure mysteriously gone. On the gun decks of the Bella Potent, the general estimate of his nature and its unconscious simplicity eventually found rude utterance from another foretopman, one of his own watch, gifted, as some sailors are, with the artless, poetic temperament. The tarry hand made some lines which, after circulating among the shipboard crews for a while, finally got rudely printed at Portsmouth as a ballad. The title given to it was The Sailors. So here's the concluding poem of Billy Budd Sailor, written by another foretopman of the same watch that Billy ran high aloft in the sails of the Bella Potent. The title is Billy and the Darbies. Again, Billy in chains. Good of the chaplain to enter Lone Bay, and down on his marrow bones hear and pray, for the likes just o' me, Billy Budd. But look, through the port comes the moonshine astray. It tips the guard's cutlass and silvers this nook. But 'twill die in the dawning of Billy's last day. A jewel block they'll make of me tomorrow, pendant pearl from the yardarm end, like the eardrop I gave to Bristol Molly. Oh, 'tis me, not the sentence they'll suspend. Aye, up is up, and must up too. All is up, and I must up too. Early in the morning, aloft from a low, on an empty stomach now, never would it do. They'll give me a nibble, bit o' biscuit ere I go. Sure, a messmate will reach me the last parted cup, but turning heads away from the hoist and the belay, heaven knows who will have the running up of me. No pipe to those halyards, but aren't it all sham? A blur's in my eyes. It is dreaming that I am. A hatchet to my hawser, all adrift to go. The drum roll to grog, and Billy never know. But Donald, he has promised to stand by the plank, so I'll shake a friendly hand ere I sink. But no, it is dead then I'll be, come to think. I remember Taft, the Welchman, when he sank, and his cheek it was like the budding pink. But me they'll lash in hammock, drop me deep, fathoms down, how I'll dream fast asleep. I'll feel it stealing now. Sentry, are you there? Just ease these darbies at the wrist, and roll me over fair. I am sleepy, and oozy weeds about me twist.